Hello everyone. In this episode, we continue to explore the bizarre stories leading to the downfall of various Chinese dynasties. Last time, we discussed the Qin dynasty, and after Qin came the Western Han dynasty. The process and reasons behind the fall of the Western Han dynasty are even more complex and peculiar. Why is that? Let's take a closer look. As the subsequent dynasty, it always tries to correct its governance based on the reasons for the fall of the previous dynasty. For example, if the last emperor of the previous dynasty was greedy and lustful, the next dynasty would focus on educating the heir to the throne to avoid such traits. If the previous dynasty was too cruel, the next would surely be more lenient towards the common people. Except for Emperor Cheng of Han, who was somewhat incompetent, most of the earlier emperors of the Western Han were quite decent. The Western Han was not as brutal to its people as the Qin dynasty. So how did it fall? You can pause here for 5 seconds to take a guess and write your answers in the comment below. You might not believe it, but it was ended by a man who was almost too good to be true. Who was he? His name is Wang Mang. During the Han dynasty, relatives of the empress were often referred to as the imperial in-laws. If the empress was highly capable, her in-laws would also wield significant influence. Wang Mang was a relative of Empress Wang Zhengjun, the wife of Emperor Yuan of Han. From a young age, Wang Mang demonstrated exceptional abilities. He was intelligent, studious, and diligent in his work. He was humble towards those of lower status and very filial to his elders, gradually standing out within his family and being strongly recommended by Empress Wang to serve in the imperial court. After becoming an official, Wang Mang held himself to the high standards of Confucian sages. He did not flaunt his wealth, nor did he become arrogant as his rank and titles increased. Once, his son accidentally killed a household servant. While such incidents were not uncommon at the time, Wang Mang insisted that his son committed suicide to atone for the crime. Thus, Wang Mang rose higher and higher in the court, eventually becoming the Grand Marshal, in charge of military and administrative power. His interpersonal relationships and reputation also improved, and he was well liked by almost everyone. However, along with his popularity grew his ambition. Wang Mang was very fond of arranging auspicious signs and heavenly mandates, which were seen as lucky indicators or heavenly signs indicating a mandate to rule. He used these signs as reasons to promote himself and elevate his rank. For example, once he secretly ordered someone to bring a white pheasant and 2 black pheasants from the frontier as tribute, which his supporters took as an auspicious sign. So why were these pheasants considered auspicious? It turns out that during the Zhou dynasty, the most virtuous regent, the Duke of Zhou, also received a white pheasant from the frontier. Thus, Wang Mang was comparing himself to the most virtuous regent in history. His supporters seized the opportunity to propose elevating Wang Mang from a marquis to a duke, equal in rank to the Duke of Zhou. The concept of auspicious signs and heavenly mandates might seem laughable today, but back then they held immense significance. This relates to the legitimacy of ancient Chinese emperors, known as the Mandate of Heaven. If an emperor ruled well, heaven would show auspicious signs to prove his success. If he ruled poorly, heaven would send down disasters to indicate his failure. But you might ask, wasn't Wang Mang not an emperor? This brings up another question. Must emperors always come from the same family name? Clearly not. The Qing dynasty's emperors, surnamed Ying, were replaced by the Liu family of the Han dynasty. When Liu Bang, the founding emperor of the Han dynasty, first led a rebellion against the Qing, he killed a white snake blocking his path. Soon after, an old woman appeared, crying that her son, the son of the white emperor, had been killed by the son of the red emperor. The ancestors of Qin Shi Huang had claimed to be descendants of the white emperor. Thus, the event symbolized heaven's message that the son of the white emperor should be replaced by the son of the red emperor. This was also an omen that Liu Bang would replace the Qing emperor and become the Han emperor. So now it's clear, Wang Mang's use of auspicious signs and heavenly mandates was not just about becoming a duke. These signs and mandates were the only way for him to legally transition from an imperial in-law to an emperor. But then something incredibly amusing happened. Since auspicious signs and heavenly mandates were secretly orchestrated by people, essentially anyone could design them. A man named Zhen Xun fabricated a mandate claiming that heaven believed he should be granted a noble title. Wang Mang was naturally disgusted by this behavior, but he couldn't accept only the mandates that benefited him while rejecting those that benefited others. So he had no choice but to grit his teeth and grant Zhen Xun a title. Unexpectedly, Zhen Xun pushed his luck further and fabricated another mandate, saying that Wang Mang's daughter should be married to him. At this point, Wang Mang couldn't tolerate it anymore and finally bared his fangs. He ordered the arrest of Zhen Xun and his followers. Some were exiled, while the rest were executed. From then on, no one dared to play such games again. Later, Wang Mang took advantage of the old emperor's death from illness and took control of the court on behalf of the young new emperor. During this time, he continuously created various auspicious signs and heavenly mandates. Finally, using the name of Liu Bang, the founding emperor of the Han dynasty, Wang Mang crowned himself emperor and established the new dynasty, naming it Xin, literally means new. After Wang Mang became emperor, he worked hard to implement many reforms. However, his reforms were too drastic, upsetting the interests of powerful landowners and bureaucrats, and they failed to bring tangible benefits to the common people. The country continued to decline. 15 years later, Wang Mang was killed when a peasant uprising army called the Green Forest Army stormed the capital Chang'an, leading to the fall of the Qing dynasty. Looking back at the history of the late Western Han dynasty, although it appears that Wang Mang's usurpation caused the fall of the Western Han, there were actually many irreconcilable crises within the dynasty. The most obvious issue was the Matthew effect, where the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. In ancient times, land was the most important resource. Some nobles and landowners inherited vast amounts of land and wealth from their ancestors. During poor harvests or famines, ordinary farmers, having no income, were forced to sell their land to landowners and nobles in exchange for food to survive. The following year, having lost their land, they could only rent land from landowners to farm and sustain themselves, paying rent in return. This was the most typical process of land annexation. If this process continued for too long, It led to a concentration of arable land and wealth in the hands of a few, while the majority became impoverished and landless. Eventually, unable to survive, they would rise up in rebellion, causing a severe crisis in the late stage of the dynasty. Alright, that's all for today's episode. In the next episode, we'll explore the efforts made by the Eastern Han Dynasty to prevent a figure like Wang Mang from seizing power, and why these efforts still couldn't stop the Eastern Han from falling as well. Stay tuned!